everybody, I'm Tom Vasel.
And I'm Roy Cannaday.
Today we're taking a look at Clank Catacombs. And I want to come right out the gate by saying this is a brand new game. This is Clank. It's if you know how to play Clank, you'll learn this in like 2 minutes.
Right.
But if you've never played Clank, good news, I'm gonna explain how to play this from scratch. So let me do that, because then we have a lot to say about it.
Awesome.
In this game, players are going to be going through a dungeon. You have a starting tile. You can play it on either side here at the beginning of the game. And you're going to be running through this dungeon looking to get an artifact. You have to get at least one artifact. Each artifact is worth a various number of points on them. If you make it and get an artifact, and you get back to the starting location, because each person is going to start from this spot here, if you get back to there, you'll get an extra 20 points. And then there are all sorts of tokens and cards that are worth points on them, and whoever has the most points wins. If you die, but you're in the purple section, and there's the first couple tiles placed on the board are purple, then you don't get this 20 points, but you get to keep your other points. If you die and you're in the blue section, well, then you get 0 points. Or if you don't get an artifact, you get 0 points. This game is a deck builder, which means you have a starting deck and you'll shuffle it, and each turn you'll have 5 cards that you will play. Cards, when you play them, might give you special abilities. Your starting deck will not, although you have some cards that are negative abilities. They give you Clank, which we'll talk about in a second, but they usually give you some currencies. You have skill. That's the blue diamond that allows you to buy more cards. You have the footprints here, which allow you to move on the board, and some cards will give you attack, which you use to fight monsters. For each footprint, players are going to be able to move on the board. There's some rules, like this is an ice, a crystal cavern. When you move into there, you have to stop moving. You'll notice that this here is an arrow, so it's a one-way token. It's also locked, which means if you want to move on that spot, you need to spend a lockpick. Each player is going to start with 3 lockpicks, and when you unlock an area, when you go through it, it's unlocked for everyone after that. If you decide to go off the board, you'll draw the top tile of the deck, and like I said, the first couples are purples, and you can rotate that any way you want so that you move around and go to different locations. And so as the game goes by, more and more of these tiles are going to be revealed. As you reveal tiles, there's going to be all sorts of things that you can do and places that you can go to on the board. But the artifacts, you have to find them. So sometimes you'll turn over a card and it will show a spot to put an artifact. And when you do that, you'll take the top, you stack these from lowest to highest, and you'll place it there. So this is the 5 artifact. Although sometimes you'll draw one like this that shows a plus, or this one has 2 pluses, which means I don't draw the lowest. I skip down to skip 2 here. So this artifact is worth 12 when you place this one out. There are all sorts of other things on the board. I'll mention a few of them. I mentioned the lock things already. There are monsters. When you go through these, you take a damage unless you spend a sword. Sometimes there are spots with footprints on that will cost an extra movement to move through them. There are spots that when you move into them will heal you a hit point. There are spots that show a treasure. Here you have to spend a lockpick, but then you will get what's called a major treasure. There are stores where you can go to the market to spend gold that you've gotten. There are portals that when you move into one, you can warp to one of the other portals on the board. And there's more things than that. There's ways to free prisoners, which I'll talk about in a second. And there are shrines. When you go to a shrine, you will put one of your tokens there. You can only have 1 token at each shrine. And then you'll get a gold for every shrine that you visited in the game. And all these tiles have various things. Some of them have a ghost symbol on them. When that shows up, you're going to be throwing a ghost cube into the Clank bag. Here's one that shows the prisoners. You'll free a couple prisoners, but again, you got to spend a lockpick to do that. So the lockpicks, you're going to find a lot of places to spend those. You can also buy cards on your turn. That's what you're using skill for. So at the bottom of each card, there's a number, so that requires 4 skill. If you've played that many cards, you buy this card, put it in your discard pile. When your discard pile runs out, you'll be able to shuffle these in. And these have all sorts of things. This one's worth 2 points at the end of the game, and he also gives you a skill, a sword, and a movement. And when you buy this guy, when you acquire him, you get a sword and a movement immediately. So that's pretty handy. And these are going to be all different costs. Like I said, they have special abilities. This one lets you get rid of one of your burgle cards, and it gives you a movement point. There's also monsters out here that you can attack. This one requires 2 swords, and if you defeat it, you get a movement. And then if you use a portal this turn, you get an extra movement. Many cards also have arrive, which means when you flip them over from the deck, something will happen. This one rotates each square tile with any players on it 180 degrees. If you don't want to buy any of these cards, you also always have these cards. You can always kill the goblin to get a gold. You can always buy secret tomes, which do nothing but give you 7 victory points at the end of the game. And explorers and mercenaries. Explorers are about movement. Mercenaries are about fighting. You can buy those and put them in your deck. After you buy cards, if there's any spots open in this line, they're replaced from the top of the deck. And if you draw a card from the top of the deck that shows a dragon on it, so these are all safe. Let's find one. Here's one with a dragon on it. Then the dragon attacks. That brings us over to this board. I mentioned Clank earlier. Anytime you make Clank, you have to throw a cube here. And you'll be throwing cubes onto this board. Whenever the dragon attacks, all the cubes here from all the players are going to be thrown into a cloth bag. This bag has a bunch of black cubes in it, but you'll throw all these in. You'll then look at where the dragon is. So if this was a 4-player game, the dragon would be here on this bottom spot, and that means draw 2 cubes from the bag. You'll draw 2 cubes. So here I drew 2 black, nothing happens. But if you draw a player's color from the bag, you place it here on their hit points. And if you ever take damage other reasons, you'll place these here, and if this gets all the way over to the skull, then your player dies. Now, every time someone finds an artifact, you move this up, so more and more cubes will be pulled from the bag. And if you ever die, you're out of the game, but on your turn, you'll just draw some cubes from the bag, trying to accelerate the death of everybody else. A few more things about this game. There's a lot of gold that different cards and things will give you. That's worth points at the end of the game. But if you're ever in a market space, you can spend gold. There's a backpack, which lets you carry 2 artifacts. Normally, you can only take 1. A lock-picking set, which gives you 2 more lockpicks. This heals you for 2. And these are just worth points, but you'll notice they're all worth various amounts of points. They're also minor secrets. When you go to a spot with these, you'll take it. For example, this is a dragon's egg, gives you 3 points, but moves up the dragon's rage by 1. And this just gives you a lockpick, but they might give you potions and movement and whatever else. When you free prisoners, you'll draw 2 of these prisoners, and each of them will give you either victory points, maybe some special way to get victory points at the end of the game. Fortunately, the game comes with an entire sheet that shows you here's what all the minor secrets do, here's the major secrets, here's what the market items do, and here's what all the prisoners do. I'm pretty happy with the components for the game, with the exception of these lockpicks are kind of little and small. There are white cubes. These are ghosts. When these get thrown into the bag, when they get pulled from the bag, everyone takes the damage. So there's that. And that's pretty much how the game plays. Okay, so first of all, we've looked. It seems like many, like the new Adventures expansion,
right,
will work with this, and that's kind of cool and stuff. That's kind of an aside here. But I said at the beginning, if you know how to play Clank, you'll know how to play this, and that is 100% true. There are differences.
The rule set is extremely similar. The point of the game is extremely similar, basically doing the same stuff.
And they definitely took a couple things from Clank Legacy.
Right, yeah, that's really cool.
So that's in here. So the big change here is the tiles. You're laying these tiles out, exploring through this. I really like that.
I love it too. I like the fact that because before it was cool to have with the Clank the different boards because you wanted to change it up. This lets you change it up every single game.
Yeah, so it reminds me a little bit about Clank in Space, which has a random board, but it still is, you set the board up.
Right.
So I'm looking at the board going, okay, I can make like some strategy. I'm going to move here and here. Here, I'm discovering stuff as we go, and I love the sense of discovery. This also makes this game really easy to expand.
Oh, for sure. And it gives you that strong sense of exploration. And Clank was always about just a little bit further. A little bit further. I can go a little bit deeper. This gives you even more of that because you can go deeper in every direction, basically. So it makes it kind of interesting. Like, I'm going to go over here and they're going to go over there. But then they add in the whole like teleporting thing so that map isn't as far apart as you would think. So it's kind of cool.
Yeah, and there's some really neat things I didn't mention in the overview. Like, there's one of the major treasures is something that lets you go against a one-way arrow. But I want to talk about the lockpicks. That's the new mechanism for this. So in the original game, there was a key that lets you go through locked doors. Now everyone starts with 3 lockpicks. So you're never completely stuck, but you have so many temptations to use them.
Oh, for sure.
Because there's lockpicks that let you go through the locked paths. There's lockpicks that let you get a major treasure. There's lockpicks that give you a tome. There's lockpicks that free the prisoners. And the prisoners are a nice addition. It's something else to collect. I thought that's neat to the point where I'm tempted to buy this lockpicking set, even though it's worth only 2 points, just to get some more lockpicks.
Oh, for sure.
And if there's a card that comes out that gives lockpicks, I'm like,
It'd especially be important if, like, you needed extra lockpicks, because there's always that point in the game where it's like, I should go back up. I'm about to die. So, like, maybe you need to grab lockpicks so that way you can get out faster. You know, those locks can help you get through shortcuts a lot quicker.
I also want to mention the exploring through these is neat. They also can be manipulated and changed. I showed one card that turned these 180 degrees. But I want to point out, I think this game does a good job at it, that it doesn't do that so much. This isn't some insane, oh, everything is moving all the time. It just happens once in a while, but it does give the dungeon a slightly more dynamic feel.
Right, and then once the stuff's laid out, you can kind of be strategic about your moves and things like that and try to figure out, okay, the tiles are laid out this way. I have a plan of escape, you know, and that's kind of a strategy you can set up for turns in advance.
And for me, I mean, I hate to use the word, you know, like killer.
Right.
But I don't know that I ever want to play regular Clank again, because this gives me everything that Clank did. And I mean, there's some of the expansions for Clank, like, oh, there's a mummy expansion, that sort of thing. But this gives me everything, and the map is different every time, and that's a huge deal. It makes it so much more. I mean, I love Clank.
Right.
But this is better.
How do you feel about this for new players? Like, would you jump straight to this, or would you go back for regular Clank? Do you think this is a little bit too complex for newer people to the system, or do you think they could just jump right into it?
I don't think it's hard.
Right.
Because, I mean, especially if I'm teaching it.
Right,
Because I'm just going to put the stuff in a pile, and I'll explain each room as they come out. But you have this sheet, which they probably should have put 2 in the box. But you have that sheet that shows you what's in the box. But I would... The differences in rules isn't particularly... The main difference is these tiles. Other than that, everything plays out the same. There's some prisoners and stuff.
Yeah, there's a little bit more complexity with the lockpicks and the ghosts and things like that, but I don't think it's too much rules overhead for the teach. I think I would just always strictly teach Catacombs, like, for new players. I think this would be my go-to Clank at this point.
Would you play the original one?
I mean, I have the original one and all the stuff, but I also have Clank Catacombs sitting on my table, and this is the one that I want to play. So...
Yeah, now I don't know. Again, I don't think all the expansions for Clank are going to be compatible with this, but most of the cards of those expansions might be.
It'll be interesting to see how they move forward with this, because this is way easy for them to adjust, because before it was like completely new board, and this board you really need these things, and this board you don't need those things, so this makes it a lot more modular.
I agree, but I want to be clear. I'm not sitting here around going, I can't wait for expansions.
Right.
I'm really happy with this. I've played this many times now, and each time I play it, the map plays very differently. You never know. I've seen one where someone's like, I need to find an artifact, and they just keep, because they waited too long. And this has that even more than the original game, because I'm like, I don't want to get that cheap artifact. So I'm going to go over here and keep searching until I find a better artifact. And then someone else grabs an artifact, someone else grabs an artifact, and you're like, I could run all the way back there and get that cheap one, or I could just keep going farther and find a good one.
And I love those decisions when it just makes you really just feel the tenseness of, like, go deeper, but it might be too far, you know.
For me, this is a 9. I love Clank already. Clank Legacy I loved. This definitely gives me feelings of both of those. It takes a lot of the things I like from Clank Legacy, not the exploration. Oh, the exploration, right, from that.
Right.
But it has the base mechanisms of Clank. It's still one of my favorite deck building games. What about you?
I'm the same. I'm going to come in and write it as a 9. I'm a huge fan of Clank. I love the original Clank. I'm not as much heavy on Clank in space. This is like my new go-to. I loved playing the Legacy system. This gives me a kind of like, I feel like I'm continuing that, but can actually replay it sort of thing. It gives me that feeling of all the awesomeness that Clank can have, but allows you to mix it up each time you can play, and that's just a win-win for me, so I love it.
Well, there you go. Until next time, I'm Tom Vasel.
I'm Roy Cannaday.
Clank!